Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of GreyhoundTV ONTrigger. So only recently we spoke to Paul Burton, who's the general manager for IBM Asia Pacific. It turned out to be a rather spectacular interview. As of this morning, we have about 60,000 views on that video. So thank you for really listening to that video in a big way. But, as a natural next step, I thought one of the largest segments of the IBM business is the consulting business. For those, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but for those who don't, it's 30% of IBM's overall business comes from consulting. So I thought no better person to talk to us about that is Lula Mohanty, who heads up IBM Consulting in Asia. Lula, thank you for making time for the show.
Always, Sanchit. Thank you for having me here.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn this morning. You've completed, 25 years in IBM?
Almost, yes. In December, I complete 25 years.
My God, that's like so many waves of IBM. I can't even say it was one IBM, right? So many IBMs you've experienced, right? So I really think you're the best fit person to talk about IBM Consulting. Also because, why you're my personal favorite, I'll tell you very honestly, is because you've spent time with the delivery side. And I think that's what makes you far more richer to lead consulting than just theoretical knowledge. So really welcome once again to the show, Lula.
This has been a very poignant moment in our history. As you know, 25 years and counting. I actually came in as part of the PricewaterhouseCoopers acquisition into IBM. So it's been true blue consulting all through. And as you rightly said, I think what makes me actually a lot more confident and optimistic is having seen through several eras of consulting, if you will, in this time. Having spent time on the delivery side, having spent time with industry, having spent time with the horizontals, with the verticals, and managing P&L and markets and geography, I just feel it's probably the best time and best momentum for us now. Now, look, actually, last year, when Arvind announced the divestiture of Kyndryl, it was a big moment for us because it talks of a lot of courage and astute, business sense to be able to do that. Because as you would imagine, Kyndryl or GTS, as we knew it then, was almost half of our business.
That's true. Yeah.
Right? So divesting that also meant clarity of purpose. And then Arvind made it very, very clear. The IBM company is going to be about two things. Simple, two things. It's technology, which is all of IBM's hardware and software and products, right? And consulting, which is everything that we do from a services perspective. So to our teams in consulting, it was very, very straightforward because although consulting was always an independent part of the business, but this steer from the top made it very, very clear that we are going to be focused on driving the transformation agenda, which is a lot more to do with the business sense, the applications and all of that. Whereas Kyndryl, in all their might, would be actually market leaders in that space, driving infrastructure management services. So I think that's the clarity we got. And the other point I would say, Sanchit, is this very, very clear, unambiguous articulation about open ecosystem partnerships, right? That every time consulting went in, our mantra is to be the trusted advisor of our clients. And every time if there was an IBM proprietary technology piece to be added on there, that just made that, there was always that sense of conflict with our clients. But this paved the way.
Interesting. So we'll come back to ecosystem, and that's definitely a topic I want to talk to you about. But let's again sort of, talk about the business and the structure a little bit. I know, the consulting business contributes around 30%. And, it's been the latest annual report I was just reading this morning. You've reported double-digit growth. Now, that's impressive. And let's double click on that a little bit. From what I understand, it's been largely driven on the back of hybrid cloud engagements and other managed services engagements. But for the purpose of this whole conversation, can you sort of double click as to what is really driving growth for consulting in terms of double digits?
Yeah, surely. So look, IBM Consulting is a third of IBM's revenue, and that portion actually varies by geography. I think in Asia Pacific, we will probably be a little more than that.
Oh, wow.
So we have seen strong momentum and growth in our revenue globally. And as you said, in Asia Pacific, it's been 7 consecutive quarters of double-digit growth and 5 straight quarters of market share gain. Yeah. So
Right.
which is something to tell for the momentum we're seeing. Now, I would attribute this growth to a number of things, Sanchit, very, very quickly. I think post-pandemic, there's an acute need to drive optimization and efficiency across the back office in the enterprise. Okay. Which meant opportunities to right-size IT, to right-size operations. And this in turn meant a lot of automation, more movement to the cloud, driving intelligence, infusing intelligence into workflows and so on. So that's the big opportunity for us. And it is, no industry is immune to this. Okay. Yeah. So it's across the enterprise. I think the second big trend is the acceleration of enterprise-wide front office digital transformation to drive sales and revenue, top line growth. Now, this in terms meant better consumer experience, more innovation in products and services, agility and flexibility, in terms of time to market. So that meant boardrooms had started to focus on, strategy enabled by technology, right? Which is about experience, digital platforms, ecosystem orchestration, use of data and AI, etc. So that's the second big. And again, it is pervasive. It's across the industry. Some a little bit more ahead of others, but you can imagine.
Yeah.
And like I said, so therefore it's been the front office transformation. It's the disappearance of the mid office, if I will. It's the back office efficiencies, right? And it's new technologies. I think the convergence of technologies, we're only scratching the surface, Sanchit. But when you put all of them together, which is, everything possible on cloud with the edge, everything possible with now blockchain coming out of this, hibernating phase, everything with the metaverse, with IoT, with 3D. So you see a lot of those silent industries also starting to pick up a lot of steam. So this has been great. Yeah, it's
very interesting what you just said. But talk to us a little bit about the industry point of view as well, and I will tell you why. Because while the front office, back office, and sort of mid office modernization is of course happening, but it's not sort of equal across industries. So are there certain industries which you sort of have observed to be the hotspots in Asia Pacific over the last course of year or so?
Yeah, I can certainly comment about the ones that we serve, and I think that's representative of the industry activities in the market. Financial services, of course. These had been the early adopters of digital, but I think the activity has intensified in the front office as platforms and marketplaces are gaining more traction, right? Which is basically the institution becomes is not the end, a means to an end, is invisible, right? So orchestration of ecosystems is the big thing. Payments, right? Evolution of payments is another big area. And then obviously the banks meaning everything to everyone. So a lot of action on the financial services. What's also happening now is the adoption of those platforms and those new products are very dependent on how much the backend, right, is tuned to it. So a lot of the back office efficiencies is also driven by now financial services, which are more vertical BPOs as we know them. So these are not finance outsourcing, procurement, HR. This is, EKYC, lending, right? The payments, it's straight through processing. So FSS and insurance now, right? Insurance companies are a lot more on BPM, right? That whole business process modeling, etc.
True.
I think similarly on the, very, very net, because we could be here the whole day. You see a lot of the industrial, historically, a lot of the distribution, the consumer and the resource group companies had intensified on ERPs, right? SAPs, etc., which was again a lot of business planning. That is now moving to the manufacturing side. So you see a lot of, planning on the manufacturing side, supply chain, inventory, materials management, warehouse, a lot of that conversation coming back up. Sustainability is a big theme across, particularly on energies and utilities and stuff like that. Healthcare, again, huge platforms, right, to bridge that gap between the payer and the provider, and now actually also getting the retailers onto it. So like I said, I think the hotspots are there. I do believe the biggest spenders is going to be government. Just across the board.
That's true.
Just across the board. So,
sovereign cloud, and I think a lot of those conversations are already beginning to get up and be a part of them as well. But look, I will come back to a lot of these themes that you spoke about, especially I think supply chain, because in Asia, supply chain came out to be a huge point of conversation, especially during COVID and post-COVID. But before that, I want to talk to you about something very fundamental as you sort of helping organizations transform. How are you sort of transforming your own organization to be able to sort of help these organizations? And I'll tell you where I come from. One of the longest standing critiques of consulting, not just IBM, and of course IBM as well, has been the human intensive nature of consulting. So what's the decoupling of the human intensive ways of working in consulting with a little more automated internal procedures for you, or let's say frameworks for you that allow you to sort of, touch more customer types with consulting as a brand?
I think that was a great question, Sanchit, right? And I'll tell you, this format of how you serve our clients better will continue to evolve.
Sure.
And I can just tell you, the progress we have made or the distance we have covered.
Please.
I think the first priority was to reorganize ourselves, not in terms of skill pools or practices as one would know it by skills, right? It was more about organizing yourselves to buyer groups because the buyers had changed. It was no longer a lot of this conversation I alluded to earlier, right? The marketing officer has very different needs than somebody who's a supply chain or HR, etc., right? So our horizontals, were more as clients would deem it. They did not necessarily differentiate whether you were doing an SAP success factor to solve their HR problem or a Workday. So our horizontals are around anything and everything to do with customer transformation, all the way from advisory experience, right? Working with the ISVs to operate in AMS and stuff like that. Similar. So we reorganized ourselves as supply chain transformation, talent transformation, customer transformation, etc. The second thing is a recognition that invariably all of them will have data embedded in it, data and analytics, a recognition that all of them will need consulting into the next best or the future architecture. So technology consulting built into it, and then cloud migration built into it. So our own organization was therefore earlier we used to have, just to make it clear, SAP as a line, right? It didn't matter, right? So it didn't matter. So to the client, what mattered is, am I using SAP to be my my ERP for core businesses? So I think that reorganization has helped us, a lot, and I think will continue to evolve in that pattern.
There's such a long journey, right? I remember speaking to IBM Consulting about SAP services and VMware services and Oracle instances, and I know for a fact till date you guys still sort of manage the highest installed base for SAP and VMware put together, and that's another area I'll come to you in a bit. But before I come to that, I think since we're in the topic of IBM Consulting becoming a new organization, I think it will be incomplete without us talking about the M&A activity that has sort of been in the highs in the last few quarters, if you may. We've seen some solid acquisitions in terms of cloud-based consulting, very geo-specific acquisitions as well. So give us a sense of how's that M&A activity helped to sort of modernize the consulting business. One is that. And second of all, are you sort of looking at any specific acquisitions for Asia simply because there's a lot of innovation being brewed out of Asia-headquartered companies as we speak?
Oh, totally. So look, I think we've done 2 in the region this year. So we started the year with SXIQ acquisition in Australia, and then Udesic extends itself
lodged to APAC as much it does to North America. And both of them are very, very centered around skills and capabilities of the cloud space, so which is great. Now, our strategy is very clear, Sanchit. From my perspective, it's a two-pronged approach to acquisition. The first is where I have to scale markets. And, this is about bringing me skills that I know are going to be important and critical for that market's growth, because doing this organically will take us a lot of time.
Absolutely.
And the second is obviously filling in the gaps in the transformation capabilities. Now, so in the first case, it could be anything. If I decide that, we are going to be, and we have a strategy called out by every market. If this market is going to be hot in SAP, I'm going to acquire SAP, even though we are big in SAP, generally the region. But so that is just a growing scale market strategy. The other one, which is more about transformation skills, you talked about cloud, that continues to be, a key area. We also are talking about product engineering a lot more, because I think Asia-Pac lends itself beautifully to this concept. And by the way, if you go back to our garage discussions, which is bringing in agile squads together to provide an end-to-end solution, I think this is, really getting garage and making this more programmatic as we go through product engineering. So that's also going to be a focus area for us. In addition to building out, practices and quick capability in some of the ISVs and, products that we tend to see a lot more in the region.
Interesting. And, I think what I'm observing also is that in Asia, the product engineering mindset is increasingly becoming the norm across organizations, right? And I think that's, very new to Asia. It wasn't something that Asia used to do in a big way. But I think it's just, post-COVID, the leaner ways of work, I'm clearly seeing that in our inquiry base as well. So kudos to you on spotting that very well. But, let's sort of change gears a little bit in the interest of time. We have a long canvas to cover in just about an hour at tops. Let's talk about the ecosystem. Again, it's a very, very large topic within IBM sectors today. Let's talk a little bit of a history where, IBM and IBM Consulting specifically always used to have these roadblocks while working with AWS and Azure, especially margin roadblocks, because, the minimum margin calls that IBM would make would be 30%, and you would just get a 7 or 8% from an AWS, and that wouldn't really compensate on the overall deal. So, how is the change in the ecosystem strategy specifically driving your business and helping you sort of drive that growth? And more importantly, I think I'd love to sort of hear more, a little double click on the hyperscaler side, because, that's where a large part of your motion exists today on the hybrid cloud side.
I think it's a great observation, Sanchit, right? But, at the outset, I would like to point out that working with ISVs has not been a new muscle for consulting, right? We've been doing this in the past. What's exciting for us is this aperture that's open with the hyperscalers today.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, interestingly, all of these elements today are explicit design points for us. And they will have concrete impact on deal structures, margins, and skills. Now, hyperscaler collaboration is fully embedded in our sales offerings and delivery motions, and joint deals are already a part of our business projects, right? So hyperscalers are more of an horizontal embed in our transformation projects. The ISVs provide more domain-specific embed for specialized players like customer transformation, the lay of the land. Now, the common approach is to plumb these partners in key deal patterns and not be ad hoc or, apply these on a deal by deal basis, which then takes away the industrialization of these plays.
True.
Now, what we do by embedding, these plays is that it allows us to structure these deals consistently, and we price for composite value. We are not pricing for, a cost plus or in the case of labor, or a consumption-driven, ARR pattern for a hyperscaler. The value, the pricing, when we embed this into a deal, is the composite value price that the clients will get from it. So again, have we totally cracked this? Is it completely value-driven pricing? I would be remiss if I said so.
Right.
But it is, so that's where we make up these margins. And now making them a part of our blueprint already allows us to bake what those margins are likely to be. So you're not adding on hyperscalers as a layer, and therefore it'll be even hard to say where the margins split. Yeah, because
it's a dramatic change, right? Lula, such a dramatic change for IBM. I think there was a time when I still remember IBM came up with these large newspaper ads saying IBM public cloud. I remember having these conversations, and why the heck are you even doing it? It's not a battle you're going to win, and it's going to alienate you away from so many of these large enterprise-grade conversations that, let's say, an AWS wants to have or an Azure wants to have, but needs an IBM alongside. So I think it's a long journey that IBM has traversed, and congratulations on that. But you mentioned ISVs, and again, it's a topic which is very close to my heart, and I'll tell you why. Because again, Asia has a lot of these great, cloud-based, cloud-born ISVs. Now, while I see IBM doing a tremendous job, both on the consulting side and the non-consulting side, to onboard a lot of these global ISVs, and the fact that your Salesforce practice has grown, your Adobe practice has grown in a very big way, that's beautiful. But having said that, a lot of these Asia-born, Asia-headquartered SaaS companies don't always get the same limelight within the IBM systems. But the fact is that they are driving major global business, as take Xero, for example, or Ramco, for example, hundreds of such examples, right? Now, how do you sort of bring them into your fold and not lose out on that opportunity?
There is huge recognition on that, Sanchit. I would tell you, massive recognition on that imperative, and especially so in Asia Pacific, right? So we have an ecosystem program for smaller ISVs, SaaS players that have specific technology or industry capability that satisfy the emerging needs of our clients. These are not one-off clients, but we notice patterns, right? This ecosystem program is run by a unit called Ventures, Ecosystems and Acquisitions. Now, the idea is to engage early on relationship building, do a lot more work together, then they mature into a strategic partnership, and and so on and so forth. So there's an entire journey that's carved out for us, right? Now, what we do is this team actually provides these organizations, a business platform to work with some of our large global clients, without the necessary sales and account overheads to actually start to map the synergies and work with them more and more. Now, this is a win-win for both organizations as we are tapping into the ecosystem. Now, this is about early stage growth companies, and then you start to bring in IBM Consulting, and you're starting to carve out value propositions together, right? Because otherwise it is very easy to get distracted also. Just the plethora of choices that we have in this market. So, for example, as I'm making the fall plan, this is our fall planning cycle. The readout to the team is the next 10. So it's always the next 10 and the next 10 and the next 10, and in strategic areas for us, right? So, many examples, but let's say in data, Snowflake, Databricks, Palantir, Cloudera, Informatica, right? In cloud, whether it's Cast Science, Logic, Copado, I could just go on and on, data. So I think that program is very much on, Sanchit. It's very systemic. And our idea is to, as we encounter some of these more and more with our clients, how do you orchestrate a value proposition together? And it's a lot more deliberate, intent-driven, rather than opportunistic at the coalface.
Interesting. That's very interesting you say that. What I'd love to also sort of pick your brains on is, since we're talking ISVs and SaaS and engineering mindset, one of the big motions I see in enterprise deals today is the inclination towards open source options, because that is something that's sort of beginning to become a mainstay, even with some large companies where their developers, internal self-developers, want to sort of roll up their sleeves and sort of download a Redis or download an open source and sort of go from there, really, right? So this entire IT is becoming twofold: innovation IT and enterprise IT. Now, how is, let's say, I'd love to understand, let's say, give us some examples of some deals you worked in or been participated in, wherein open source was a big part of the conversation, and what was the structure, and how did IBM Consulting help this client?
So look, I mean, I think again, it's a very involved topic. I mean, clearly you are speaking to a client, Sanchit, and you're getting a lot out of that as well. Now, look, we always have been an advocate of, what is quote unquote open source. Now, this is actually an integral part of what we do as technology consulting. Okay. Now, see, if you look at, I mean, earlier it was fashionable for clients to have an entire array of cloud options.
Yes,
and
true.
then I have on-prem, and then
True.
there wasn't any particular strategy, to decide which workload resides where. Right?
The strategy was what looks better on the CV, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, more is good, etc.
True.
However, even today, I would tell you there is a divided view on this, and I don't think anybody should jump to any premature conclusion on whether a single cloud strategy is good or whatever. I think Arvind's point of view, hybrid cloud is the way, is how most likely reality will unfold itself. So our school of thought emerges around that it could be a hybrid cloud estate and embracing open source. Now, this is obviously evident in our RedHat strategy, as you would have heard, globally from IBM News, that it's not just IBM. I mean, of course, we are making a lot more IBM products out there with RedHat that, makes it even more open, but it's also our endeavor to land a lot of the ISV SaaS players that we have today on RedHat platforms, that's also open source, etc. I think the big conversation, and, I don't even want to go into this, is what kind of open source is good? Do it yourself or enterprise open source?
I think you hit it really well. I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there is a difference in drawing upon multiple upstream public domain open source code branches and doing a do-it-yourself as regards to compatibility, integration, security, ongoing version control. You can spend and complete, you can dedicate a complete, task force to do this, versus abstracting away that discipline.
True.
Okay, in enterprise open source and just focusing on mission critical activities. And I think that is the big education. So I think clients understand a clarity on cloud strategy. Clients probably will get to anybody and you can get a checklist of how you choose open source. I think discipline around open source adoption, it's a little bit about the age-old days of what to keep in-house, what to give away, how much is, make, build, buy, all of that conversation. But that's a lot of what we do as part of tech consulting.
Interesting. Recently we were working with a client of yours, and they're very huge in open source, and they have a dedicated team which does finding bugs in the system. So their high point in life is, we found 3 bugs this quarter. And why I was presenting to them, and I said, well, is the focus 3,000 crores or 3 bugs? So
100%, yeah.
So I think that's where sort of focus derails very quickly for them.
I mean, clients should have a design authority team, right? Or just like you said, a very thin layer to monitor, manage, orchestrate open source, but the discipline, the management, at best for enterprise grade, because a lot of this has already been thought through.
True.
Somebody smarter has probably done this, right? So
true. Yeah. So look, I really want to talk about RedHat. Again, it's a topic I'm just going to touch and go, because we can probably spend 3, 4, 5 hours talking about this. But give me again at 30,000 feet, as IBM begins to embed OpenShift across its products from a layers perspective, even starts to embed OpenShift with, let's say, Azure, AWS, and the others. How does that impact your IBM consulting practice? What are some of the deals you're getting into just on the back of that movement of OpenShift being embedded as part of core products?
Well, I think it's just, to be very honest, Sanchit, it only makes my opportunity landscape bigger. I think we have stuck to a very fundamental paradigm in consulting, and that's not changed. Time first, right? Time first. So candidly, as we go in, Our problem is actually the other way around. If IBM products are ported on OpenShift, it is great, right? It's a competitive area, right? It's a pros. It's actually positive for us because then anybody can come and do an evaluation, and we would go with that feedback. Our attempt is actually to bring in, like I said, other ISVs, other products out there on OpenShift, because I think RedHat is an OpenShift platform we're all married to. Because when it comes to hybrid estate, I think there is a lot of value to be extracted from RedHat. Right? Unless, of course, again, our clients will point us where we need to go, but we are an advocate for RedHat. So the more products that are ported on this, including IBM products, it's actually just better for us, right, to go in and do this kind of conversation.
Interesting. Good. So look, we'll shift gears. We've spoken for 35 odd minutes already. I want to go back to where we started from, as the business themes. I'd love to start from the front office, but before that, I'd love to pick your brains in the supply chain, because it's a topic which we're seeing swell up so largely in our inquiry base, especially from Asia. And, so much so that supply chain modernization, right from infrastructure up to IoT, 5G intersection to data conversations, analytics, is all out there right now. Talk to us about your observations in supply chain as a topic. How have you helped clients? Give me some key examples of, let's say, people who are hearing this conversation, that they can take away something from this, please.
Yeah, as you rightly said, there's just so much work going on supply chain. In fact, we've recently published a study from the IBM Business Value about the CISO, right? Not on the CISO, on the CSO, the Chief Supply Chain Officer, if you will, in companies. So I think the facets are manifold. I think, starting with the supply chain visibility across the entire network, across the entire network. That lends itself to inventory management, shortages and surpluses, sourcing, right? The entire, order fulfillment, the strategic positioning of distribution centers. So, like you said, it's an entire gamut of work. And I just said it very simply, but as you can imagine, underpinning all of those big, the words that I mentioned are all the technologies. Visibility would mean, IoT interfaces, SCADA interfaces, all of that. So I think that is one big change, right? Second is data and AI for actionable visibility, right? Across all this, whether it is in the sourcing function, whether it is, like I said, right, it's across the end-to-end supply chain network. There's also a predictability angle here, which is, whether it's external events in order to predict disruptions. That's again just extracting the how the external environment manifests. Weather is, I'm sure you almost are thinking I'll give the weather example. It is just one of those external variables, right? There is a lot more data that comes out, that also takes on these things. So for example, in that same sense, I was trying to think of a recent conversation I had. It's also like, how is inflation going to impact those kind of variability analysis on supply chain, etc. So there are many examples. Bestseller, something a program in India, where we were using AI tools to help predict the best products, for their new offerings, determining the right product mix, their sourcing strategy at a store level.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
At a store level, right? Improving the efficiency of a supply chain at a store level. So again, you can see that, given the demographic differences, at a different, so the sourcing mix will be very, very different. Where you source it from, how you stock up, what is going to be the demand prediction, right? All of them are going to be hugely variable, at a different store level. Another example, right? We did a supply chain control tower first for a telecom company and now for a multinational chemical company. This would actually connect various parts of the supply chain, hard and soft, right? Through multiple country, regional manufacturing jurisdictions, to really provide transparency, across the region in terms of where are the supply chain, gluts and gloats, as we call it, right? So again, that's another. So there's a lot of work that's happening in this area. We are actually deploying our best of robotics, AI, quantum into the supply chain efficiency, and then sustainable supply chain is the new area, right?
Oh, it's a huge topic. I think sustainability overall is a huge topic. But I'll sort of summarize. I know you're very passionate about this topic, but I'll summarize it. Recently I was with the chairman of a very large retailer, and he said, look, I don't care about supply chain issues or whatever. What boils my blood is that when a customer walks into my store with money to spend and I cannot service him. And I think there's no bigger failure of my organization but that. And I think that's where, demand patterns, because, his point was that my demand patterns in Singapore versus Jakarta are so different. And that impacts my supply chain, that impacts my production and manufacturing. And I need to know more. But unfortunately, it's just, it takes money and people from consulting work to do that, right? So nonetheless.
Well, retailers are massively worried about that, Sanchit, because right now, everything is available in every market. So it is really that, you look at us, we are all consumers, right?
True.
One bad experience, right? I'm looking for a product, it's not available. The guy's out of my radar, right? It's a defective fulfillment, right? So I think that's the reason I said supply chain visibility is probably the biggest area. And then, of course, as you go deeper into the business, all of those things begin.
But you know what the irony is, Lula? One would expect such large companies to at least have made the investments in visibility, but we are here 2022 and still talking visibility. And I think that's an irony because such large companies, you would expect them to have invested aggressively in that topic till now. But
I'll point you to another real problem on the ground, though, Sanchit. This is the most disorganized vertical. Okay. Imagine, in the past when we were in management books, you read about vertical integration. The biggest opportunity is here. But it's also the most disorganized. The pandemic was a big revelation, right? When doors started to shut down in different manufacturing hubs, where I'm going. Suddenly, everything was a black box because beyond that, there were no systems, right? So I think as we are starting to implement and integrate these on the ground, I think the biggest challenge is availability of systems, availability of data. The system of record is non-existent, different levels of maturity. So I think the orchestration, it's like when people initially wanted to do big data marts and all, right, the non-availability of data warehouses, those days was a problem. Now you can anyways do without it. But I think it's the same. Just bringing everything together is the biggest challenge.
True. Again, very quickly moving on, we've got 10 more minutes to go and a lot more to cover. When we met in Singapore, one thing really stayed back with me was the talent modernization practice that you have at consulting. And within that, what really stayed back with me was Grab. Now, Grab is a perfect example of a startup not consuming a technology consulting services per se, and more talent-oriented consulting from IBM. Talk to me about that. And it's very fascinating, and I'd love to hear more on what did you do for Grab?
Grab outsourced its core HR processes to us, okay? To increase, it was multifaceted. And Grab, as you know, we all have a lot of respect for how, this is orchestrated.
Absolutely.
But it was about increasing operational efficiencies, reducing delivery time, enhancing the overall customer experience for its stakeholders through how you experience their core services, right? So the full scope outsourcing was all about employee data management. How do you acquire raw talent, the learning process, right? The learning and development, and then obviously, small things that contribute to experience. People getting paid on time and, being error-free and stuff like that. So it has actually resulted in almost 35% reduction in total cost of ownership, massive productivity improvements, right? And improvements in employee experience that we are tracking and will continue to track. But there's a lot of other exciting thing happening in that talent transformation area, right? So one is this full HR outsourcing, but we've talked about very different concepts, right? I think, starting with talent acquisition, onboarding, I mean, these are employees, suddenly with all of this conversation on talent, that was your biggest asset. So predicting employee motivations, predicting employee churns, right? Creating a differentiated experience. I think those are now using really high-end analytics and AI, which is not just based on internally what employees are telling you, but what is the conversation going on in social media, for example, and things like that. So there's a lot of action on that. I think the big conversation is build, operate, transfer on employees, right? I mean, if a company, if I'm a banker, it makes a lot of sense. I know that tomorrow I'll be operating, I'm only having digital bank. My team will do very different work. So if I can just outsource, build me 100 people, all native data AI users who will use personalization, visualization to put in different product models offered to my clients, then why am I going to invest all that money? First of all, I may not be able to acquire that talent. So this full, in many ways, those talent creation agenda is also becoming very, very, important now.
From strategic outsourcing to talent outsourcing. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so look, this conversation would be incomplete if we don't talk about, again, where we started from, which is the digital commerce and how the front office virtually doesn't look anything close to what it used to be about 5 years ago, pre-COVID times, right? Now, it's a topic which is very close to my heart as well, because we do a ton of advisory on that. But I do feel that while we walk 2 steps ahead, we also sort of walk 1 step behind. What sort of holds back a lot of organizations is this traditional thinking, processes, the ability to, or the lack of the ability to take a risk when it comes to digital commerce models. Now, I know you have a very large partnerships coming in with Salesforce, Adobe, and the others. Talk to me about, let's say, a few use cases where you've sort of literally helped organizations move the needle on, let's say, trying a new digital revenue product, or let's say launching a new digital first product. One is that. And second of all, what also really fascinates me is the handshake between the human agent and the bot agent. Again, a very large topic, which completely sort of stands unresolved in my view today. How sort of have you worked with organizations on these 2 facets of the front office?
See, Sanchit, it can be, like you said, digital commerce is probably the biggest area of transformation, right? That's happening everywhere. And a lot of maturity, a lot of progress in 12 months. It will probably take us a lot more than the time allotted to talk to specific examples. There's so much going on, but I'll outline a few things, right? I think the key shifts, first of all, over the last few months have been a sophistication in the digital journeys. See, bot plus human. The good part is majority of the companies who started on digital journeys also started with bots. Although the bots there were doing very predictable, jobs, simple queries, and then a few, ambitious ones were more about advisory functions on wealth management, blah, blah, blah. You've known that. So the bots human intervention has been, now bots are, it's a little seamless. When I said sophisticated journeys, it's probably transparent to you. When it moves over from a real agent to a bot who's doing part of the servicing, and then the third one. So it is integrated play. But again, I would tell you that's not the hard part. Okay. I mean, it depends on if you have only bots or but it's a hybrid model, which is probably how it's going to be. So sophistication of digital journeys. I think the bigger thing is more deployment of AI use cases now. The journeys are becoming sharper, right? More targeted. So that's where the deployment of AI use cases, and it is still proving not to be that successful because the data fabric underneath that is not as sophisticated, right? People are still pulling from data warehouses. And now, you're talking about, data lakes, and we are now talking about lake house and all of that, right? So it's all AI use cases, right? I think it's also about now, these are very small fundamental things, Sanchit, but it's the reality. As much as commerce is progressing, I think the underpinning architectures are not found to be as resilient because, see, they were never built in the first place to be representing the company itself, right?
True.
So digital was, a side channel. Now it is the channel. So they have to be as resilient as your mission critical, as you would have a Sabre systems and all deployed. So I think that mission critical imperative means that the data architecture has to be far more resilient, right? I mean, zero downtime, very open, and, the architecture has to be for the future. So I think all of this is coming together. Now, to your point on, so what are we doing, with some of these in terms of really creating revenue stream, new products? It is the art, actually. See, whenever we are doing, a lot of the conversation with insurtechs, for example, is all about, new product launches and how quickly you can integrate if they have a banker channel. End to end, right? I mean, you are actually arranging for the footfalls.
Yeah.
You're making sure that the footfalls into the bank website is directly segmented to your, and then faster time to market on products. So, I mean, giving you a few, I think targeted and personalized marketing across all channels, right? That is all driven. Servicing customer needs consistently across all channels. Virtual assistants, agent assistants. We talked to it about it. A good example, and I don't know whether I'll be able to name the client, but a good example of what this work entails is, let's say, an automated replenishment signal from a store shelf. Okay,
that's a huge
that in terms will predict a potential out of stock situation. And you've heard these case studies, but these are actually happening in reality. Inventory balances will get automatically checked, right? And an automated transaction is generated and transmitted to the distribution center to ship products to this. This signal is the
ideal world, right? Scenario.
Yeah, no, but the important thing is this is what is being orchestrated now, right? Now, to what extent you will be successful, but this is where that whole ecosystem lines up, right? This is exactly what we are doing in some of our clients today, which is trying to map this end to end.
Good. Again, we can go for hours on this, but let's sort of change gears very quickly in the last 5 minutes or 7 minutes or whatever. You spoke about new buyers, which is the new CMOs and the CFOs and the CSOs. Now, these are new buyers that IBM has not touched in the past, are not necessarily people who understand IBM or even like IBM for that matter, because of whatever reasons, right? And I'm not going to get into that, but talk to me about how are you building relatability with these new powers of spend simply because they're not avoidable anymore?
I think, again, it's a great question, right? I mean, this is all about evolving, how you are best organized to serve your customer base. I think relatability is built with relationship contacts, a mutual understanding of where the problem is. And that problem statement is not, you don't go and knock on to somebody's door and say, what is the problem statement? So I think our first strategy is to provide a lot more customer interface, which means a lot of people who are covering these clients, not just, in the IT back office, but across all domains, so that, and we are very focused on that strategy because, it's about going deeper into your client segments and not necessarily just broad base. And then you have a little bit of a fairy dust sprinkling across all your client portfolio. So first and foremost is that. I think the second conversation is, proof of delivery. I don't go about concepts anymore. So these garage squads or the client engineering squads that we are putting together is basically co-create, co-experiment, co-ideate first, right? Co-ideate, co-create, co-validate, right? I mean, I think this is going to be the mantra, not just for IBM, right? When you have choices, you would want a lab to test out and do stuff like that. So I think a lot of our design thinking workshops, a lot of our garage conversation is actually also a community space for us.
Makes sense.
It's a community space, bringing together clients, understanding what is the value proposition, feel that they have a say in the matter, and we are in this journey together. I mean, I know it's a very short answer, but I think that's how we do it.
We're playing musical chairs now, aren't we? So, but sort of before we move on to my final question, I'll give you 2 cents on that one. There's a truckload of companies within Asia which are going to go IPO very soon. Now, where they excel is in the innovation IT part, which is the engineering mindset and sort of open source and DevOps. But where they sort of really falter is when they have to go to IPO. They're not IPO ready from that perspective. And maybe that's a service line you can consider, essentially IBM Consulting goes and sort of, puts on the needles on the innovation IT to make it enterprise grade, bring in that sort of readiness to sort of report that data back into the markets, because it's not something that startups know very well. So again, that's just a small input. But, in the closing, let's talk about ESG. It's a topic which is a favorite for so many people out there. I'm still sitting on the fence about it, Lula, honestly, because the reason I sit on the fence is because I think there's a lot more being spoken about in annual reports than the actual work, tangible outcomes on the ground. Now, what's IBM Consulting doing on ESG?
We spoke about this in Singapore. I think today words are a lot more than what actually actions are, but I'll keep this very net. We have mapped our client needs to a very clear set of offerings. Number one, ESG performance management.
Okay.
Number two, decarbonization, energy transition. Number three, intelligent assets and ops. 4 is green IT. And, sustainable supply chain, which is a big ticket, but you can break it down into offerings, right? We have ongoing engagements with over about 15 clients today, and majority of them are in the energy, the resources space, right?
Okay.
We've also created, our entire NVZ solution, right? And, we've got a strong portfolio of solutions after our acquisition of NVZ, which is, also provides a dashboard across all of the strategic partners who are doing similar sustainability work, right, with our clients. Now, I think sustainability, to me, the starting point is in what you have existing. You're not creating something which is, is labeled like this is a sustainable product.
Sure.
But, it's in building it into the platform. So like I said, we have a sustainability practice in our large deals archetypes, which, lends itself to all the conversations we had: commerce platforms, supply chain platform, talent transformation platforms, right? Data, architectures that we are pulling out. It is about, how do you use technology? So green computing is very much a part of it, right? I mean, simple things. If obviously there are processes that lays themselves into more fundamental sustainable actions, anything we do with, supply sourcing or, on the utility side is a lot more. But just, it is there in so many small things, like I said. But I think, that's where we are. The good news is this conversation is a lot more integral. I think digital and sustainability are linked. You won't do a digital transformation unless it's a sustainable transformation. And that's where we will start to create value. But it is a big practice for us. We have already created folks. It needs subject matter SMEs. If you really want to do the hardcore, sustainable transformations that we are planning to do, it's about doing those smaller things, but clearly having a measurable way to see how this has actually minimized your carbon footprint. But it is a big conversation. Still a lot of words. I agree with you. A lot more action is done.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a little cynical about it. It comes naturally to being an analyst, but more so, I tell you, because the boards remain wary about committing to anything that doesn't move the needle either on profits or margins. And I think until and unless sustainability can connect directly to a top line or a bottom line conversation, I think till that time, it's going to be still living on the sidelines. That's what my personal belief system is. But nonetheless,
I have just a rejoinder to that, right? I mean, I know you and I agree on this. And, the COP27 was, again, a clear articulation of why it is not happening. I really feel that compliance is going to drive some amount of acceleration. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good. I agree. But good, Lula, thank you so much for your time. We're on the top of the hour. It's been a power-packed conversation. I really appreciate you sort of going through the journey with me, and I hope our viewers enjoyed this as well. So thank you once again, Lula.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. I mean, there is so much more, and the momentum is massive. Asia-Pac is the place to be. I've always said that, but happy to spend this time.
Sure. Thank you so much. And dear viewers, thank you so much for making the time. I hope you found this conversation useful. If you have any tough questions for Lula, do send them in, and I'll ensure I'll email them to her. Thanks once again.